So they're really, thinking about what travel marketing is in a completely different way and leaning into branded entertainment. And what I loved about, his recent presentation was that, the podcast is not even relegated to travel content. It's about the lifestyle. It's like about what it's like to be there. It's about potentially what it's like to be a mom there. And, so realizing that travel marketing is more than just marketing, right? The exact travel experiences. It's about just learning about a community and connecting with people.
We're back, and you're listening to another edition of Over a Pint. Kurt Lingel, you fired up for this one? You fired up?
I'm fired up, as always, especially today.
I am too, and I know this is going to be a good one. This is crazy. Yesterday, I posted on LinkedIn that we're having Victoria on here. It blew up. I mean, it literally blew up. Victoria, you're kind of a big deal, aren't you?
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Today, joining us is Victoria Simmons. Victoria is the Senior VP in the travel space at BBK, and this woman knows a ton about travel. You have worked, Victoria, with the state of Maine, the state of Wyoming, the city of Reno. Help me out. What else am I missing there?
Let's see. West Virginia, Belize, the Dominican Republic, visit St. Pete Clearwater.
I mean, Jesus,
this is of fun stuff.
Big names. This woman obviously knows the space, and we're going to be digging into the travel section today on this podcast. We all know, I think this is pretty safe to say, that travel has been a roller coaster for this 2+ years. Honestly, I think it's going to continue to be crazy, but no one cares what I think. Let's hear it from the expert. Let's hear it from the woman who's been into the space for 20 years? Is that safe? A long time. Yeah. Victoria Simmons, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, particularly with you, Pat, a former colleague, and so good to see you again and to meet Kurt. So thank you for having me.
Nice to have you.
Victoria, it's called Over a Pint for a reason.
Yep.
We've talked about this. Young lady, what do you got in front of you?
I have got an Abita Amber. I think you know this about me, Pat, that I'm a Louisiana gal. So this Abita is brewed in Abita Springs, Louisiana. So of course I had to have one of those. Strawberry is actually my favorite. Where a lot of my family lives in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, is the strawberry capital of the U.S. And they have a big strawberry festival, but it's hard to find. So today I'm settling for my Amber.
That looks amazing, doesn't it?
That does look good. I want one of those.
Mr. Lingel, what do you got?
So Victoria, you said you worked on Wyoming, correct?
Yes.
So this beer is straight from Wyoming. This is Roadhouse Brewing. It's their Wilson Mountain Style IPA. I've had it before, and really an interesting quick story on this, and I think you will appreciate this because it hits on, I think there's some commonalities here. So we have a client in Wyoming who sent this to us. So I thought that was kind of cool. Good beer.
Yeah.
And I thought that got me kind of excited. And then I had a friend recently go out to Wyoming. I said, bring me back some of that Wilson Mountain Style IPA. So I've now become an ambassador all the way from Wisconsin for this beer. And I think part of it is just because I'm excited about the story. It just got me all excited because of the, how you connect. So the emotion, as we're going to talk about later, there's an emotional connection. Cheers.
I don't know that one. Cheers. I'm going to have to check that one out. We're on the same wavelength because I have my Wyoming shirt on today.
I saw a little, yeah.
Well, I'm feeling the love here, guys. On a nice hot summer day here in Milwaukee, I'm going with a sour. This is Surly Brewing. It's the Mango Supreme. I've had this before. I'm just a big fan. Cheers, everybody. Victoria, again, welcome to the pod. Let's get into this thing. Victoria, you just came back. Let's start here. Let's start at the 3,000 foot level. And No, let me take a step back. Victoria, why don't we do this? Give us a little bit about how you just got into little bit of your background, how you got into the space, and then we'll talk about some of the trends. So give the people a little bit of background about you and your work in advertising.
Sure. I guess, let's see, I was inspired by Melrose Place, I suppose. So I'm one of those odd people. I thought I would always be a science major. My roommate in college, her brother worked for an ad agency. And I thought, would I rather be out in the world or in scrubs in a hospital? So, of course, I chose advertising. And I'm one of the rare people who have many years later, I'm still doing that. I do love the ad agency business. I love working around creative people and artists. And of course, the side of my personality that's kind of, analytical and business driven, I get to use both of those. So it's been well suited to what I love. And when I started with BVK, earlier in my career was with bigger networked agencies in Seattle and Philadelphia. When I started in BVK, I was in Florida and I started just working on travel business. So my career at BVK has been mostly working on travel brands.
Awesome. Cool. So we've got that as the backdrop. Let's get into the travel space, an area that you are super familiar with. I know in our kind of pre-pro connection before the show, you were talking about you just got back from the e-tourism show. Victoria, what's going on in the travel space? What's happening from that 3,000 foot level? Give us the insights.
Yeah, lots going on. Obviously, it's been quite a couple years for the travel industry, but things were looking good. So the eTourism conference is one that's paired with what's called IPW, which is a big international show where international suppliers come into the U.S. to learn about our travel product here. Last year's show was in September, and of course, at the time, travel from the internationally, the U.S. was not open. Those suppliers had to get special permission to come in, so it was a smaller show. It was in Vegas. We were fully masked. This year, the show is at normal time period in June, and it was back to normal. Like we were in Orlando, and of course, Florida was maybe never really masked, but no mask. All those international suppliers were back. It was great to see the show kind of again in full force as a testament to the strength of the industry. So, there's been that pent up demand for travel that, we're really starting to see come back. Of course, now we're dealing with the state of the economy and rising gas prices. Just this morning, and I missed for a client meeting, the U.S. Travel Association has just published some new forecasting. There are two companies have been doing a great job of monitoring traveler sentiment as we've navigated the past 2 years, Longwoods and Destinations International. And so they've just come out with some new research that about 2/3 of U.S. travelers are saying that gas prices will impact or greatly impact the way that they travel.
Wow.
So that certainly is significant and not necessarily what we want to see coming out of the pandemic. But the pandemic was kind of an anomaly for the travel industry. It was new for travel to be prohibited, for lack of a better word. Historically, it's been a really resilient industry, even when we go into a downturn in the economy. So what we're hearing from travelers is that while gas prices will impact their travel, they'll just stay closer to home, or they'll take fewer trips, or they will spend less on things like lodging and entertainment. So, Americans are very passionate about traveling. They haven't been able to do it for a while. They're going to do it. They're just going to have to make some changes in how they're doing that. So, the silver lining is that people are still traveling.
Victoria, if I could stay on that for a second, and we talked about this as well in our pre-production conversation with you, where you hit it on the head. It's like we were here 2 years ago, there was nothing. We all wanted to get out there, and then 2 years later, things are looking good, and now we're facing some of these breakers, as you call it. And I was reading the travel insights, and I found it very interesting. I love how you talked about the test tube and the breakers. And the test tube are all of us that we're so like, oh my God, I want to go, and we're ready and all this stuff. And then you've got the breakers, which are the killers. They suck. And they're all the things you outlined. It's like, gas prices, all these things that we weren't factoring in, months earlier. But
yeah,
but then you kind of came around and said, okay, but how do we pivot and counter some of those realities that maybe, change some of the travel behaviors? And I just found that write-up really interesting. There were some really cool things in there that were, I thought, very unique and insightful. And it's like, okay, how do we attack this?
yeah. I think the travel industry is tired of the word pivot because they've had to do it so often. And, historically, I don't think that the travel industry, working across many different brands, right, in the agency world, I think the travel industry is a little insular, and I wouldn't say that it's the most innovative industry, but, they have had to be over the course of the last couple of years. And so hopefully kind of that spirit of innovation and tenacity and resiliency will continue to push the industry forward. I do think because travelers maybe get to travel less than they have previously, they're putting a lot more importance on the trips that they are taking. So finding ways for trips to be even more meaningful. And, people really want to know that when they're traveling, they're having making a positive impact on the communities they're visiting. So whether that's by eating at a local restaurant, being able to do some volunteer work when they're there, I think people are looking at travel a lot differently and wanting to get more meaning and value out of the trips that they are able to take.
Victoria, when you were at the conference and you're talking to people and you're, sitting in presentations, anything surprise you? Anything jump out to you and that gave you a sense of pause, or it's like, oh, interesting. Oh, didn't see that. Or, is this where things are going? Is there anything that really kind of...
Well, I guess, one of the recent blogs that I wrote was about this notion, and Pat, you're familiar, having worked at BBK in a previous life, about value-based brand positioning. I'm kind of excited that the word value is even a buzzword in the travel industry right now. We've always known that travelers align themselves with brands that now reflect their own values and belief and purpose. I think I've been a little bit bummed. I'm happy that it's a buzzword within the industry, but a little bummed at maybe the superficial way that it's been playing out over the course of the last couple of years. So, when I see people giving presentations about values, it's often kind of boiling it down to creating content that sort of plays into what maybe some of the, societal issues right now, like sustainability and diversity, are big buzzwords in travel right now. And those are all critically important issues for us to be able to address, but really wanting to make sure that brands understand that in order to take on some of those issues, it's got to be rooted in a brand's core identity and in their core values, or, they really risk, like Pepsi and MasterCard and other big brands have kind of stepped into things that felt inauthentic to their audiences when they really weren't being core to who they were as brands.
So let's dive into that, because this is a space, again, travel, but this idea of values is something that you're very, very familiar with. It's something that you, I would say, really even helped pioneer and help drive within the travel space. The article that she's referencing, for those who are listening, is called Value-Based Positioning versus Values-Based Marketing. That's on LinkedIn. Victoria Simmons, check that out. But Victoria, give the listeners a little bit about your thesis and what you were trying to get across in that.
Well, I think it's about understanding your brand's, what we would say, core value. Our values are our guiding life principles, right? They are why we make decisions about who we want to be when we grow up, where we want to live, and they certainly play a role in, where we want to spend our vacation dollars. So really understanding your destination brand, your organization's brand value, can help connect help you connect and develop conversations with your consumers that are just much more meaningful and authentic. So I think the premise just of that article is to spend some time thinking about what your organizational values are and really let that guide your marketing efforts instead of really being reactionary and what I would say having some values-based marketing tactics, like developing content, that might not be synonymous with who you are only because it's, an issue in pop culture right now.
Gotcha. So this is a really big, I think this is a really big deal for people to get their head around, because my bugaboo with a lot in the travel space is this idea of we've got something for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? You want that? We got it. We're perfect for that. And the fact is, you may not be. You may not be. So this idea of values, this idea, you're saying it's kind of getting used and people are accepting this more, but it's kind of like maybe they're bastardizing it a little bit. How are you feeling? How receptive are brands now into talking about this, into really kind of digging in? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think they're really interested in it. One thing that, travel industry learned coming out of COVID is that, residents really want to have a voice in the way that tourism plays out in their communities. Like they want to feel like they're part of the process at the same time when sort of destination marketing organizations are evolving into more management organizations, right? Thinking about things like tourism product development and experience development, and not only sustaining, but regenerating some of those beautiful natural assets that they're marketing, but we all want to be able to enjoy well into the future. So I think in order to make, have residents feel like the destination brand reflects who they are and the communities they want to live in means we need to know what our residents' values are, what our community's values are, and how do we use that and sync that up to our marketing efforts.
Victoria, we heard that a while ago. We had the marketing director from Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge. And a big part of what David was talking about was the ambassadorship program. And we were getting into the same, Q&A, talked to us about the marketing. But boy, he spent a lot of time on ambassadorship and how important it is to really connect with the local businesses, the local people, because those are the resources, the folks that really, really make an impact, whether or not me, you, Pat, enjoy our stay. And I think you're spot on. And the other thing I was reading, Pat, as you said, trying to get your brain wrapped around, I was reading the value-based positioning versus value-based marketing. And it's interesting when you're talking, Victoria, about a lot of the values that I always try to break it down. So in layman's terms, but it's spot on. It's no different than, the types of people we like to hang out with are people that we share values, the same values, or the companies we work for. Why wouldn't it be any different for a vacation destination or anything else? You're right. It's authentic. It has to be these days.
Yeah. And sometimes I think we don't realize we're doing that, right? We make decisions based on our emotions and then we backfill them with all the rational reasons why we've done that. But emotions do drive what we do.
Victoria, let's shift a little bit to what you're seeing out there and what you're experiencing, and just in terms of the actual kind of marketing. So we had a mutual friend of ours on the pod not too long ago, Jennifer Simmons, and in talking to her and just in talking to other guests as well, one of the things that's coming across is this, the need for speed. Like people are moving, organizations are moving much quicker than they have in the past, and things are just getting compressed. And one of the examples that she used is with marketing plans. Marketing plans would be put in place for basically a season, and then you'll run them and you'll check in and make little tweaks here and there. But by and large, it was set and you run that out. You read the results at the end of the campaign and things are done. That's moved from maybe a year-long thing to monthly. Like people are what's going on? How are we adjusting? one, are you seeing that as well in your conversations? And what other shifts have happened, let's say, in the years prior to the pandemic and what you're just experiencing now in the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of our clients coming out of the pandemic actually wanting a long range strategic plan and realizing that that can guide, given how quickly you need to plan and react and get things in market, still needing that strategic framework to root some of those decisions in. So right now, I would say we're doing a lot of that strategic planning. I think at this time when you're having to think about things beyond just marketing, but about sustainability and diversity and, but also being able to use the taboo word pivot. Right now, as marketers, we've got a lot of performance data and we've got a lot of marketing automation to be able to take advantage of using that data to still stay true to sort of a strategic framework, but be able to push different levers and channels and to drive performance, almost on an ongoing basis these days.
Wow. So your role, that kind of ties into my next question is the clients that you're working with now, they're looking for both that kind of strategic as well as some tactical things, right? That kind of strategic framework, but they understand they have to drive some tactical thing. Victoria, how is your role, like just as an agency, has that changed at all? Again, prior pandemic versus what you're seeing now. Are the questions that you're getting different? Are the asks from, the heads of marketing, have things changed along that line?
I think things have changed significantly. Of course, one of the great things about the pandemic is that we're no longer hiring talent from just, our Milwaukee headquarters. I was remote before it was cool to be remote.
Right.
So it comes second nature to me. But, as our clients' needs shift, the resources we need as an agency are shifting as well. And so when you take off kind of that geographic, parameter, we're able to hire talent, the right resources wherever they happen to be located. So that's a great level of flexibility now for us. The other thing is, we're kind of using permalancers, like building, a team of individuals that when we have like a greater workload, they're familiar with working with us. They're familiar of the categories that we're working in and the kind of clients that we work with. So they can jump in as a new resource, but when we need them. So building a larger group of resources that we can tap into.
Interesting. And do you see that continuing for the foreseeable future, or, what's your crystal ball say in terms of that?
Yeah, I definitely, I think it's funny how comfortable we get with, I guess, the new normal of not being back in the office and being able to work remotely. And I guess having worked in the travel sector over the last couple of years, it's been really, really hard. And I do think people have a new, wow, we did that. We got through it. A resiliency and a kind of pat on the back that I don't know that there's much more you could throw at the travel industry that we couldn't get through at this point, having done what we just did.
Hey, Victoria, question I have. Pat kind of got into it a little bit earlier, and I think he's right. It's like there's this, and I think it's outside the travel industry too. I think a lot of brands are guilty of this. They want to be everything, right? Versus really being honest and owning who they are, the authentic. But in your experience, Victoria, when you're working with clients, destinations, how hard is it to have a client be honest to say, you know what, this is who we are. I'm okay with that, and let's own it, and let's really highlight the positive. And and Pat, I'm thinking about when I thought it was one of the more fascinating conversations when we had Nebraska tourism on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it was honestly, it's not for everyone. That doesn't, the fact that they owned it, and it's and they really made some cool things out of it. What's your experience, Victoria, when you're dealing with people? How hard is it to get to that point where people are like, you know what? Yeah, that's who we are. Let's own it. This is how we're authentic.
I think that's a very hard thing for people to do. I was lucky enough to be able to work on that with Jennifer Simmons, on that brand. It takes some guts to be able to do that. And what's hard, I think, in particular for, some aspects of the tourism industry, like destination marketing organizations, are typically part of state government or county government, or they're public, private, and they're accountable to, a government entity, and they don't tend to be risk takers generally as a category. I think there still is we do want to be all things to all people. And so, that's something we deal with all the time. But what's the old adage? If you're everything to everyone, you're nothing. So, we know in this industry, you can't outcompete on the stuff. Everybody's got the stuff.
Right.
So it is that spirit of your community and the values that you represent and the lens through which you send up these kind of experiences. And, that's always really a key education point for us. And it takes some time for some clients to be comfortable with that. What we do, I would say, is not easy. Our approach at the agency is to push clients a little bit further than they're comfortable doing. And it works for some clients, and for others, not as much.
Hey, Victoria, give me your take on travel websites. It seems like that has really shifted in importance since the pandemic. But I'd love to get your take on how are your conversations going around that channel? Have there been any significant shifts that you've seen? Where's that going? I'd just like to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing coming out of the pandemic is that some travel brands gained a lot of credibility when consumers weren't trusting some of the misinformation or different changing information that was coming out from the government or the CDC. They gravitated to actual individual brands to understand what's it like to travel to your place, to your point of business. So I think there's a newfound respect for, individual travel brands, destination organizations in particular, that maybe they didn't have before. So I think they're really need to think about how do they take advantage of the fact that people actually know who they are now, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
seeking out information, making it easier for travelers to plan trips. That's always been a difficult thing, but making it, planning information more accessible, making trips more flexible, being able to personalize things. A lot of opportunities now for web development in the travel space.
Interesting. So let's stick on that for a minute, but kind of shift a little bit here too. And one of the things that I want to get your take on is, you've worked with a lot of big brands. You've worked with, premier, like the top shelf brands, right? These are organizations with a lot of resources, let's say, right? Both financial as well as people.
Yeah.
But this is also an interesting time, and it seems like challenger brands, those who might have been off the radar, those second, maybe even tertiary destinations, that this could be a unique time to grab some market share and grab some visitors, right? But how do they compete? Like if somebody came to you, like how, like you got some of these second tier players, it's like you got a good story, but how do you work with these guys? And is there an opportunity for them right now?
No, absolutely. One of the things I always see is that they, when you have a small budget, you still try to do everything, right? And I do think in the travel industry in particular, you go to conferences, you see the new shiny object, and you feel like, okay, I've got to add that thing too. So my advice would be to pick one thing and do it incredibly well. We actually do that with our bigger clients as well. Like if we're going to do a brand partnership, let's pick a brand that's aligned, to who we are as an organization, and let's do it really well. Let's make sure it's fully integrated. Let's make sure we're using all of our channels. So I guess that would be my biggest advice for smaller brands, is just to not try to do everything. Pick what you're good at, look at your staff. If it's social media, great, opportunities around social media for young, smaller travel brands. But be strategic about what you're doing, make sure it's fully integrated, and just, if you can only pick one thing, just do that one thing well versus feeling like you have to do everything.
God, that is such sound advice, and that is so, so spot on, I think, too. And yet, simple doesn't equal easy, does it? I mean, it's a very simple.
The hard lesson to
It's a
follow.
very simple, but it's just the temptation to just like, where's that shiny piece of metal? There it is. Oh yeah, I talked to someone and they had killer results because they did TikTok. We got to do that now. It's just impossible. It's really, really difficult to keep focused, I think. But yet you're right. When brands and organizations are able to do it, I think they do find a lot of success. Kurt, were you going to say something? I cut you off.
No, I agree. It's so hard. It sounds great and it's so hard to do, but you're spot on, Victoria. It's do less is best sometimes, and really, if you can, get vertical. I guess staying on that, and it's as we look at because a lot of the brands that we deal with, or a lot of the brands out there, are challenger brands or are smaller destinations. And I just, as you look out there, I mean, what are you seeing? Do you see some that where you can say, not to put you on the spot, but you might say, boy, there's this, these folks seem to be doing it really well. Whether, it's like, I kind of like what they're doing. They're making the most out of their situation. Are there any that catch your eye? And maybe big or small, I'll throw it out there.
Yeah, actually, at eTourism Conference, I just met Stuart Butler, who's the new CMO for Visit Myrtle Beach. And one of the things I love is that he does not come from the industry. So he's fairly new to the industry. And they are actually investing in podcasting and broadcasting. And, even I think they're contemplating doing television programming. So they're really, thinking about what travel marketing is in a completely different way and leaning into branded entertainment. And what I loved about, his recent presentation was that, the podcast is not even relegated to travel content. It's about the lifestyle. It's like about what it's like to be there. It's about potentially what it's like to be a mom there. And, so realizing that travel marketing is more than just marketing, right? The exact travel experiences. It's about just learning about a community and connecting with people. I just think that's a really innovative approach, and enjoyed the conversation with someone who doesn't come with necessarily the best practices.
Interesting. Victoria, do you see this as a trend happening? Like you said the travel space is a little bit insular, right? Mm-hmm. Insulated from, and they kind of group together is bringing people from outside with maybe not hardcore travel experience. Is this something you seeing more of, or is this just kind of an outlier?
I'm seeing it a little bit. What's I guess been good. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, a lot of travel brands had to lay staff off.
Yeah.
But they're rehiring again. So we're going through a pretty significant turnover in people who are managing these travel brands. And I think that's bringing some new, maybe needed lifeblood into this industry. So I think we'll start to see some different things come out.
Interesting. I bring that up because I saw that happening probably 5, maybe 7 years ago in the higher ed space, right? Yeah. Where they started bringing in more and more people that were not higher ed professionals, like traditional kind of marketers. And I'm just curious if that's happening there. You talked a little bit about sustainability, and I want to just touch on that. It seems like this is it was an issue before pandemic. How much of an issue is it going to be moving forward, Victoria? Over tourism was a hot topic. Is it still there? Or have people forgotten about it just because, hey, we need to make up some dollars again? Where's that just topic at?
No, I think it's very much still there and should be. What happened during the pandemic is when people wanted to be outside, like, for example, our client in Wyoming, there were a lot of people who were all of a sudden in this big, wide open space who had never been in open spaces before. So many clients had to educate people about how to be in the outdoors, how to act responsibly. So that's still going to be something that's ongoing. I think the next step of that is, we're kind of even shifting from talking about sustainable travel to regenerative travel. How do we regenerate and revive some of these places to make sure that, we have them to be able to visit well into the future? And I think travelers are wanting to have a hand in that, understanding their impacts on travel and communities. I think we learned that during COVID. What you do as a traveler when you're in a community, whether you're making a positive impact or a negative impact. A lot of people want to do their carbon offsets. They're looking for green accommodations, but even more than that, they want to participate in some of those regenerative activities, whether it's cleaning a stream or maintaining a trail or doing some volunteer work while you're traveling. I think we have a heightened sense of our impact on the planet more than ever.
So you've mentioned that a couple times during this interview. So that's a thing now, huh? So people are going and traveling and yep, interesting.
Yep.
Victoria, with you better than anyone with Wyoming. The one thing I've always liked about, if you look at their website, I'm a big fan of Why Responsibly, and it's kind of like when people hit that tourism site, there's this, you can go and you can learn about leave no trace and invasive, pests and weeds and bear safety and all these things that allow you or help you to be a better steward when you come to the Cowboy State, to Wyoming, to play and recreate. And with the Yellowstone having the 150th this year, it's like, I know they're very not concerned, but they want to make sure. It's like, we've got a lot of folks coming here. We want to make sure they're responsible. I agree with you. It's not going anywhere. And there's a lot of areas that are heavily taxed.
I think there's a big trend too towards off-season travel. Like if you really want to experience a place when it's not at its peak, try the fall or try, some of the downtime when you may have an even better experience. I think one thing we've learned in the travel industry is you're never going to, you're not really going to shift behavior to that significant of a degree, but helping people just have positive and respectful and sustainable experiences when and where they do travel.
Victoria, you are responsible, you and team, responsible for creating such iconic campaigns in this space. Nowadays, when you are out and you're looking, you're a student of the, of what's going on. Who are you looking at and going, man, they're killing it. They're really killing it. Who do you look toward right now for inspiration? And I'll tell you what, maybe it's not in the travel space.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I can come up with one example. I do think it's interesting that people don't watch commercials anymore.
Right.
Or, so I guess that's one thing I do try to do is actually engage with content, and, advertising.
What's your thought on that? Because right, people aren't watching commercials as much. That's just the fact, right? And yet earlier, some of the spots that you and the team created were meant for a bigger screen, right? I mean, were meant for those big panoramic views and those just gorgeous, spectacular shots. How has that impacted how you just approach creative now, given that the world's been reduced to, a phone or whatever? How has that impacted you guys?
Just, I think the way that we produce things is different and more robust. And, we're concepting as integrated teams. So, there's no such thing as a creative briefing anymore, right? It's a briefing that's got, the earned media team. So people who are managing social channels and paid media and, anytime we're producing something, we're cognizant of the fact that it's got to work across a bunch of different mediums. So we're shooting, video footage while we're also shooting stills, and we're making sure we're getting what we need for vertical and horizontal formats. So, I mean, it has gotten a little complicated, hasn't it, Pat?
Yeah, it has. It has. Before we let you go, look into your crystal ball, Victoria. What do you see coming up for the rest of the year in terms of travel and then beyond? What else should we be looking out for in this space?
I think things are just going to continue to improve for travel. I think we have a rough patch with the economy, ahead of us. But I think one thing we've learned during the pandemic is people just have such a passion for travel. I think it's hardwired into who we are as people. Like, we are going to roam and we're going to connect with people and we're going to learn new things, and people are going to find a way to be able to do that. I think maybe the recovery, and I'm interested to see what that new forecasting was. I'm going to go watch that U.S. travel webinar later this afternoon. But, the recovery may be slowed a little, but, we're on the upward trajectory. And I think we'll continue to see that and see innovation coming out of the industry with, learning what our new travel patterns are going to be.
Victoria, do you think on the heels of that, do you think as you look ahead in the crystal ball, and it's hard to do that, but given where we're at, what we're seeing, do you think certain types of destinations are going to win, at least in the short term, based on, the situations that we're dealing with? I mean, I know that during COVID, what places that were winning were the road trips, because that was where it was like we all grew up in. Let's get in the station wagon when we were kids, and mom and dad drove us to the Badlands, and it was that old school Americana type of vacations. Those are the ones that were winning. What do you think where do you see the success happening?
That's hard to say, because I do think we will continue to see that, particularly like this year, as there's some strain on the economy. And I think people like, second tier cities, smaller cities will continue to see growth because people want to really have an intimate experience in a community. But that doesn't, you can do that anywhere, right? Geography or city size, place size, I don't know that matters if travelers can have those meaningful experiences. I do think coming out of the pandemic, we're wanting something grander. We haven't had that in a while. So where you do that, I don't know that matters, but we are placing more prominence on the meanings we're getting out of our trips and making them more impactful.
Victoria Simmons, thank you so much for being on Over a Pint. You have been awesome. I love talking to you. For the listeners out there, they want to connect with you. How do they go about it?
Yeah, you can visit bbk.com and you can take a look at the current. There's a tab called the current. There are all of our travel insights are published, and I believe my contact information is at the bottom of that page. I'm happy to converse, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Victoria, you've been awesome. Thanks so much for being on.
It's been so nice to chat with you again, Pat, and to get to know you, Kurt. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, Victoria. Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.